So this week, Microsoft announced that they are taking steps that drive resiliency and security for Windows customers. What that means is they want to move a lot of security features out of the Windows kernel and perhaps work on an API that will allow user space code to access kernel mode features in a secure way. And a lot of Linux gamers have been celebrating this. NotebookCheck says Microsoft paves the way for Linux gaming success with a plan that would kill kernel level anti-cheat. And that's a sensational headline. And I've talked about this before. I think that it would potentially be good for Linux gamers if there was no kernel level anti-cheat on Windows. But at the same time, I also am very skeptical that this will have immediate benefits for Linux gamers. So I wanted to go through this article and kind of debunk some of the stuff that I read in this because it's funny. I don't know. Let's go through this and take a look at what they have to say. Back in July, after the massive Crowdstrike outage that ended up grounding flights and bringing businesses around the world to its knees, there was talk from Microsoft about locking down the Windows kernel in order to prevent similar issues from arising in the future. Now, according to a Microsoft blog post about the recent Windows Endpoint Security Ecosystem Summit, the company is committing to providing, quote, more security capability to solution providers outside of kernel mode. According to the blog post, Microsoft and many of its security partners and vendors discussed several aspects of the future of security in Windows. But moving security features out of the kernel has some interesting implications for the future of gaming on Linux. Removing kernel-level security software would mean that anti-cheat software would all have to be re-implemented with user access. Okay, making it less intrusive and far easier to emulate with translation layers like Wine or Valve's Proton. Now, this kind of shows that this person doesn't really fully grasp the concepts at play here. Removing kernel-level security software would mean that anti-cheat software would all have to be implemented with user access. What they're trying to say here is that if the anti-cheat software isn't running in kernel mode, it'll be running in user space mode. Okay, right, that makes sense. Making it much less intrusive, that's debatable. It'll have less privileges and far easier to emulate, which it's not emulation, with translation layers like Wine or Valve's Proton. Now, there are lots of games out there that have user space anti-cheat built in. As far as I understand it, Steam's anti-cheat is not kernel mode. It's also not very good at its job. But the thing is, we're talking about security software when we talk about anti-cheat, right? And it really doesn't matter if a piece of software is running in kernel mode or if it's running in user space on Windows, right? If Proton is capable of simulating the Windows kernel space just as well as it's capable of simulating Windows user space. The fact is, these pieces of software, it doesn't matter if it's kernel or user space software, are capable of determining if it's running on Windows or if it's running in Wine, right? So theoretically, I mean, if you have just a very basic understanding of this stuff, you might think, oh yeah, it's just going to be simple. It'll be trivial to implement Windows user space applications in Proton. But again, we're talking about security software. We're not gonna be able to just trick the software into thinking it's running on Windows when it's not. Now, they go on to say, theoretically, this should make it easier for devices like the Steam Deck to run games like Paladins or Fortnite, whether Tim Sweeney likes it or not. That's absolutely not true, okay? That's just not gonna happen. Like I said, this is security software we're talking about, and it can tell the difference between Wine and Windows. Many games that use kernel-level anti-cheat software like Easy Anti-Cheat are not compatible with Linux, despite that compatibility reportedly being a single toggle in software. Right, so they're not toggling that single toggle, so then why would they allow their user space solution to run in Wine anyway? It doesn't make any sense. However, game developers and publishers are hesitant to enable Linux compatibility for some reason. Well, it's not really for an unknown reason, right? I mean, the reason is that Linux gamers are technically savvy and they're capable of figuring out things more easily than Windows users, and they can get around software security suites like Easy Anti-Cheat. Somewhat comically, Microsoft directly called out the Crowdstrike vulnerability in the blog post, although it doesn't go so far as to outright blame the outage for the proposed new approach to security. Microsoft also outlined its plan for the new security platform for Windows, highlighting resiliency and tamper-proofing as main goals of the new security platform. Quote, both our customers and ecosystem partners have called on Microsoft to provide additional security capabilities outside of kernel mode, which, along with SDP, can be used to create highly available security solutions. At the summit, Microsoft and partners discussed the requirement and key challenges in creating a new platform which can meet the needs of security vendors. Some of the areas discussed include performance needs and challenges outside of kernel mode, anti-tampering protection for security products, security sensor requirements, development and collaboration principles between Microsoft and the ecosystem, and secure by design goals for a future platform. Given this focus on tamper-proofing, there may still be other ways for anti-cheat vendors to keep Linux gamers out of their games if they so please. Unfortunately, we will have to wait and see. Well, here's the deal. Microsoft is going to have to create their secure platform. What do they call it again? Their highly available security solutions, right? I mean, whatever. Microsoft's going to have to create that API. And then Proton and Wine are going to have to completely implement those solutions in Proton/Wine. So this will be like a year or 2 or maybe 3 years out for it to hit Windows stable. And then it's going to be an additional X amount of time before it reaches Proton, right? In reality, I think it might be better for SteamOS to provide some kind of alternative right now, right? I mean, SteamOS and other Linux vendors could continue supporting BattlEye and Proton the way it is, while Microsoft tries to figure this out and move stuff out of the kernel. And maybe at some point, Linux will be a more attractive security setup than Windows is, right? Maybe. And that might be what brings developers over to the Linux way of gaming, right? I don't know if that's the correct answer. I would prefer to not have any kernel mode anything from video game developers who have no business running kernel software, whatever. And I'm also like more inclined to see more single player games from developers because frankly, online games are just completely boring. In my personal opinion, the only reason online games are fun is because you're playing them with your friends. And that's not fun. Like the game isn't fun. Playing with your friends is fun. So I'd just like to see the whole trend of online games die and go away forever. But that's just me. Then we wouldn't even have to have this argument, right? But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on this. Do you think I got something wrong? Is my understanding of this completely off base? Let me know. Let me hear your ideas in the comments. I think that's going to do it for this video, though. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.